Greetings, brothers and sisters, men and women all around the world. Welcome to another episode of Legal Minds. I'm your brother Fiji, and today we're going to get off into the subject that we discussed just yesterday. Should Judge John Robert Blakey be disqualified from Larry Hoover's case? I went back and I got to reading Mr. Hoover's lawyer's motion for disqualification of Judge Robert Blakey. But first, I want to get into this here. One of the networkers put in the comments that the reason that Blakey is showing so much bias towards Mr. Hoover was because his father wrote the RICO Act, was very instrumental in writing the RICO Act. So I went and did some research on this here. So in the process of doing this research, this is one of the things that we came across. And one of these things was this here. First thing we started doing was we went to the motion of Mr. Larry Hoover's lawyer. And if we go to number 5, it says the court then questioned the undersigned counsel as an officer of the court. How many murders do you think he is responsible for? Emphasis added. The court made clear that he was not referring to the murders for which defendant was already convicted and sentenced, but seems to be referencing uncharged murders for which he had no direct role, including those committed after his federal incarceration. The question was an impossible one to answer. So the judge kept going, and he said the undersigned counsel questioned the methodology the court wanted her to apply. The court attempted to mischaracterize counsel's reasonable question, stating, "So many we can't count." The court then declared, "I have to assess it. So I'm asking you." The court then insisted, "I'm asking you because you are familiar with the records as well, and the sentencing record has got all kinds of material. As an officer of the court, what's your estimation?" So then he went on to say, number 7, undersigned counsel again noted that it was difficult to determine how to answer the question because she did not know the methodology the court envisioned and could not agree with the methodology employed by the government. Counsel suggested that perhaps a hearing would be appropriate to answer such a question. The court continued in a vaguely intimidating tone. "You tell me because you're trying to tell me how to weigh the factors. So I'm asking you, show me how to weigh the factors. So I'm asking you, show me how to weigh the factors. How do I weigh his leadership role when you're telling me there's no way to count the number of people the murders he's responsible for? So I'm asking this the last time I asked, and you can answer the question or you can avoid it. But I'm going to ask you a question the 3rd time in your review as an officer of the court. How many murders is he responsible?" Counsel did her best to provide a reasonable response to the entirely inappropriate and impossible question, but that was not good enough. The court then suggested that undersigned counsel should ask her client in open court, stating he probably has the most knowledge of all. How many murders is he responsible for? The court even accused undersigned counsel and defendant of avoiding the question by not disclosing the number of uncharged murders defendant was responsible for. The court continued that undersigned counsel could make a submission to the court to rebut the government argument that life is appropriate because of the people he's responsible for murder. Now, this prompt me right here. And what it prompted me to do was I need to go back and see. I have never seen this in a court of law before, especially not in a federal court where a judge actually stands in and start doing the government's job. But I knew this Judge Blakey was a federal prosecutor. He also worked for Cook County. So he was in Cook County as a prosecutor as well. So he's very well versed with Cook County and Chicago based on street organizations in that area. So what he was doing the government's job. He was actually doing the government's job. So what I did, I went and I said, let me put this in and let me see something. I wrote in the search bar, did John Robert Blakey's father write the RICO statute? So I went over here, and it said, George Robert Blakey, born January 7, 1936, is an American attorney and emeritus law professor. He is best known for his work in connection with drafting the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act and for scholarships on that subject. So I went down further. It talks about his children. It talks about how his son, like in this paragraph here, it talks about his son, John, father. He is the father of John Robert Blakey, the United States District Judge of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, who was formerly chief of the Special Prosecution Bureau of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and a special assistant attorney in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. So John Robert Blakey is very familiar with what's going on in Chicago. So this was a trick question that he was asking Mr. Larry Hoover's attorney, because he's so well versed with what's going on in Chicago. He's seen that the government didn't have anything, so he biasly and partially stepped in. Not impartially, he was partial instead of impartial. So he stepped in and became a prosecutor again. So I got to read again about the RICO and other legislation that George Robert Blakey was involved in. And it says, under the close supervision of Senator John Little McLean, the chairman of the committee for which he worked, Blakey drafted the RICO Act, Title IX of the Organized Crime Act of 1970, signed into law by Richard M. Nixon. While in law school, Blakey edited a student note on the unsuccessful prosecution of attendees at the Appalachian meeting. That went back to the mafia, where you had Vito Genovese, all the mafia heads back then, Carlos Gambino, Joe Colombo, all these mafia heads, Joe Banana, they was all at this Appalachian meeting that Carlos Gambino had put together. So they was upset. So he started drafting this here on the unsuccessful prosecution of the attendees, which first sparked his interest in organized crime. So he was an expert in organized crime, and he passed this on to his son, the judge of Mr. Larry Hoover's case. He also wrote a note that analyzed civil liberties in the Union movement. In 1960, after law school, Blakey joined the United States Department of Justice under its honor program, and he became a special attorney in the organized crime and racketeering section of the criminal division of the department. After Robert F. Kennedy became Attorney General, the department began a major effort to bring criminal prosecution against organized crime members, corrupt political figures, and faithless union officials. This section assigned Blakey to the efforts. He remained at Justice until 1964, leaving the summer after the November 1903 assassination of John F. Kennedy. So this man, Mr. Blakey, was very instrumental in everything that started with organized crime, with the law, the RICO Act. So he passed his knowledge and his organized crime down to son. He passed all this on to his son. So now we have to see why this guy, Judge Blakey, is taking the stance that he's taking against Mr. Larry Hoover. He's a prosecutor in heart, and he see that the prosecution don't have no legs to stand on. So he's interjected his biasness into the hearing when he's supposed to be fair and impartial. So he has to be disqualified from hearing this case because he's already shown his biasness. He has to be disqualified from this case. Things that we really have to pay attention to. Things that we must pay attention to. This is what I have for you all today. I'm going to continue in my search of what's going on with this judge. This judge is compromised. He is compromised. He cannot sit on the bench and hear Mr. Hoover's motion. He has to be disqualified. And I am asking his attorneys, Ms. Jennifer Bajan and Justin Moore, if this judge denied the motion, to appeal it. Appeal it. Appeal the decision that the judge made because he's bogus. Don't stop. Keep appealing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Peace.